We are working on part 3 of problem 7.35. So what we're doing is allocating these support departments to each other and then to the operating divisions, which are pottery and retail. So far we've done direct and we've done sequential, and now we're going to do reciprocal, where we take the overhead costs from the support departments, and based on what they actually use of each other's support, we give that to the other support department and add it into their overhead costs. And then once these two overheads have been distributed to the two support departments, then we put the support department overheads to the operating divisions. Alright, so to do this problem, first of all, just like all of these, we have to figure out our proportions, right? So this time we have to figure out proportions for power, general factory, pottery, and retail. The first we did direct, we just had to do the proportions for pottery and retail. When we did sequential, we just had to pick the one we did first and do it. So we didn't have to do all of them. But now, because we're going to be reciprocal and going back and forth, we have to figure out the proportions for all of them. Alright, so I did that on a separate page here. So, as you recall, we based it on the drivers, right, which were machine hour and square footage, right, and how much each used of those. Alright, so machine hours are what we use to allocate the power. So we have to figure out the proportions for general factory, pottery, and retail, because we're going to distribute the power to general factory. Then square footage is what we use to distribute factory, so we have to figure those out for power, pottery, and retail. Alright, so this is power, this is pottery, and this is retail. Alright, so I figured those out, and all I do to figure out, of course, that is just take the total. So for machine hours, we take the 1,000 from general factory, the 6,900 from operating division pottery, and 3,100 from operating division retail. We add them up, we've used 11,000 hours. We don't include the power because we're going to use this to allocate power, right? So that you don't allocate it to itself. Alright, and same thing for square footage. We take the square footage from power and the square footage from pottery and the square footage from retail, added up, get 12,000. And then we divide the square footage they actually use and come up with their proportions. Alright, so let me just write these proportions in here. Right, so power is not going to get its overhead distributed to itself, but its overhead does get distributed to general factory, and its proportion is 0.0909. And for pottery, it is 0.6273. And for retail, it is 0.2818. All right. And for when we go to allocate general factory, we do that by square footage, and power uses, and we actually figured this for the sequential one, 0.1667, 0.3333, and 0.5. All right, so we're going to distribute powers to general factory to powers, and then allocate both of them to the operating. Alright, so in order to do that, we have to figure out how much overhead is going to be allocated to pottery and overhead after they go back and forth at these rates. So we have to figure out General Factory's new total overhead and Power's new total overhead after being allocated to each other. So in order to do General Factory, we're going to take their allocations times, of course, the total overhead, but the total overhead is going to be something different. We know that the total overhead is 150 for Power and 160 for General Factory, but once we give them some of each other's overhead, it's going to be something different, so we have to figure out what that is. All right, so let's go ahead and solve for that new support overhead. Okay, so remind ourselves, overhead cost without the reciprocal allocations, General Factory is 160,000, 160,000, and Power is 150,000. All right, so we're going to do a little bit of algebra to figure out what the new allocations are. All right, so for General Factory, we're going to do that first, and we are going to figure out, after I allocate Power's overhead to General Factory, what is the new overhead? So we start out with General Factory. We know it starts with 160, and we know that we're going to allocate 0.0909 of Power to General Factory, right? So General Factory's new overhead is going to be 160,000 plus 0.909 of Power. So now all we have to do is solve for GF, right? And we have to take this P and turn it into something we can solve for and know. Well, we know that this P is 0.1667 of General Factory, right? So if General Factory is 160, so we know that we can turn it into 150, right? Power is 150 plus 0.1667 of General Factory. And now we've got the same variable on both sides of the equation, so we can solve for that. And just go through, 160,000 plus 0.909 times 150 is equal to 13,635. 0.909 times 1.67 is 0.015, and so we've distributed that, and now we end up with 173. If you add 160 and the 13,635, you get 173,635 plus 0.152 GF. So there you go, and if you recall that GF is really just one GF, so you subtract 152, so you come up with 0.984 GF is equal to 173,635. Divide both sides by 0.9848, and you come up with General Factory is equal to 176,315. So this is the new overhead for General Factory that we have to distribute across pottery and retail. Now that we have the General Factory, it's kind of easier to solve for the Power new overhead because we actually have a number. We don't have to substitute in. So we just take our Power is our original 150 plus 16 and 2/3% of General Factory. So we plug that number in and we come up with the new. So just solving for Power. All right. So I'm going to use this number and this number for General Factory, this number for overhead, and those are my new overheads that I have to apply to pottery and retail. All right, so for General Factory, for pottery, right, that is based on the 0.33 and the 0.35, so 0.3333 times this, the 176,315, right? So, and then it's going to be 0.5, right? 0.5 times 176,315. So for pottery, what we end up having is 58,766. and 88, 158 under retail. All right, so that's now we have allocated our new factory. All right, let's scoot that up a little bit. And for power, right, we're still using our point 6273 and our 0.2818 as our proportions, and we are now going to allocate this 179,392, our new power overhead. So 0.6273 and 0.2818 time, both of them times 79,392. 179,392, 179,392. So that means for pottery we have 112,533, right? And for retail, we're going to end up with 50,553. All right. Direct costs. Well, we still have our direct overhead, 98,000 and 56,000. And so now our actual overhead for pottery becomes 269, 299, and 194, 711. So here's your overheads that you would have to spread out across units or however you work that for that place. But this is your actual overhead now, after you have allocated for the support departments and after the support departments were allocated to each other. All right, so that's all you really need to understand about support department allocations, that you can allocate them to each other, not at all, or sequentially, or proportionally, but that's what we're going to do with support departments. Now the next video for the next problem, 7.39, that we're going to do something completely different. We're going to allocate other products that are coming from the same resource. So go there and I'll explain that. There's a few ways we can do that.